Despite having a unique cast of eclectic characters, the Transformers has its fair share of trends. Back in the 80s, for example, it was pretty typical for Autobots to be cars and Decepticons to be jets. Now, this wasn't exactly a hard and fast rule. After all, there were the aerial bots and the Stunticons that bucked this trend. But more often than not, bots ruled the roads and cons took to the skies. So if you're part of the Decepticon Air Force, how do you stand out amongst a sea of seekers? You have to be extra fashionable. Enter Needlenose. Released in 1988, this Decepticon flyer was part of the double Target Master assortment. This means that he came with not one, but 2 guns that turned into little dudes. Starting in vehicle mode, Needlenose turns into an F-16 Fighting Falcon, and this is the first sign that Needlenose isn't like the other girls. He doesn't follow the fashion trends of the other Seekers by turning into an F-15 Eagle. Instead, he goes against the grain and sets his own fashion standard. Now, despite this unique alt mode, his colors do leave a little bit to be desired. He's primarily gray and blue, with some silver and green accents. Now, the mint green is a nice tertiary color, but I think I would have preferred the figure overall if the mint green was the secondary color, replacing the large patches of blue on the nose cone and He doesn't have a lot of playability in alt mode. He's a jet, so he's swooshable, and he does have pegs on the underside of the wings to mount the Target Masters. Looking at his Target Master friends, we have Zigzag and Sunbeam. These are unarticulated figures, but they do have some really nice sculpted detail. Zigzag distinctly has a very big-ass Bowie knife and a buckler, with Sunbeam sporting a bright purple rifle. Despite their great space aesthetic, their finely sculpted details, and their bright eye-catching colors, they're let down by the fact that they are completely unarticulated. They have the form of a sarcophagus, and they do transform into pistols, but all you have to do is flip out the barrels and flip them upside down, pretending that there's not a little dude underneath. Moving into robot mode, Needlenose is very, very streamlined, with most all of the vehicle mode regulated to back kibble. It does give him the classic Seeker wings, but also there's a big old nose cone hanging off his butt. Needlenose has some hellacious late 80s colors, with the gray base accented by purple arms, bright blue pants, and a bright lime green head nestled under a knightly helm. Oddly enough, the purple plastic used on Sunbeam is completely different than the purple plastic used on Needlenose's arms. I guess he might be fashionable, but he hates color coordination. Now, despite having a fairly basic robot mode, Needlenose does have a lot of great sculpted accents and details. They're just kind of washed out by a lot of the gray on display. However, one of the best details is the knight-like visor that he has. It's a very distinct head sculpt because it does mix the medieval aesthetic with the classic super robot and real robot aesthetics of Japan. So you have this very, very unique presence among the Decepticons. And Needlenose does like to stand out. He's fairly unique compared to the majority of the Decepticons. Many of them have basic motivations, crush your enemies, see them driven before you, hear the lamentation of their women, classic stuff. But Needlenose prioritizes fashion before fighting. It's even stated in his 1988 toy bio that he is easily distracted by Earth fashion trends, and while he fancies himself a trendsetter, he really is a slave to fashion, keeping up appearances and following the newest trends on both Cybertron and Earth. Now, he didn't appear in the Sunbow cartoon as it was cancelled by that point, and he wasn't released in Japan either. The only place he really got play was in the Marvel comics, and that was mostly in the UK comics. Needlenose is introduced as a new recruit to the Mayhem Attack Squad, a team of Decepticon Special Forces, and he quickly realizes he's in both deep shit and in way over his head, a pretty dangerous combo. Luckily, his friend Spinister was there to bail him out. While Needlenose had his buddy Spinister to bail him out, Hasbro and the fandom at large almost completely forgot the poor guy. Outside of a Fun Publications exclusive figure, the next time Hasbro would acknowledge the guy was literally 30 years after his original release. In 2018, Needlenose was one of many candidates in a fan poll for the War for Cybertron Siege toy line, but he didn't make the cut. Hasbro bought him back again in the 2019 Earthrise fan poll, but Needlenose lost again. So I guess somebody at Hasbro just decided Needlenose gets a new figure no matter what, and we finally got him in the Generations Legacy toy line. This is the 2023 Generations Legacy Needlenose, and he is just a straight modernization of the 80s original. The figure has a lot more defined sculpt work, detail, and physique, looking a lot more like a super robot in proportions. And this is helped out by the defined nightlight crest on his forehead. It reminds me quite a bit of Gigantor or Tetsujin 28. The figure's color palette is also a lot more refined, being primarily gray and blue, with the purple being accents. The arms are also primarily purple like the original, however, the shift in tone is not as egregious. The face is no longer a bright key lime like in the original G1 toy and is now instead a lemon meringue. This yellow shade is very photogenic as it catches the light very well and contrasts and highlights all of the sculpt work. In addition to that, the yellow tone also accentuates the red eyes behind his visor and mouthplate. The figure itself is a great modernization of the G1 original without straying too far into the Neoclassics territory. It really is just a straight one-to-one redo of the vintage original, and he also includes his double Target Master partners, just like that original version. These figures are just as janky as their vintage counterparts, very simplistic, next door to no articulation, and very little engineering, but the sculpt work is on point, it's sharp, it's crisp, and it's very cool and evocative. One thing I wish that somebody would do, Hasbro, Takara, Super 7, a third-party company, is prestige, small-scale action figures based off of the double Target Master, Headmaster, and Power Master armors. I think these would make really great space fantasy action figures divorced from Transformers, but that's just my opinion and totally unrelated. Now, this figure quickly became a fan favorite thanks to Needlenose's small supporting role in the original IDW Comics continuity. Now, IDW Comics focused on a fair few obscure characters, giving them much needed depth, and Needlenose was one of them. Now, going all the way back to the pre-Civil War days of Cybertron, we learned that Needlenose was the brother of fellow fashionista Trax, and this retcon is done mostly due to the fact that the original toys both had knightly-like head crests. Before the Autobot Decepticon Civil War spiraled out of control, the two brothers had a business of selling haute couture computer accessories and hardware. While Needlenose wanted to keep his boutique wares grounded for the masses, Trax wanted to transition their business to an upscale fashion house, and this led to a schism between the two brothers. And this schism was exacerbated by Needlenose's boyfriend from the wrong side of town, Terrible, or Horrible, depending on the day. Now, Terrible is a little bit of a drifter and a little bit of a bad boy, and he's been hanging out with this cool revolutionary group who's gonna change the world one step at a time. They're called the Decepticons. They're pretty cool and underground, so you might not have heard of them. At this point in the IDW Comics continuity, the political movement of the Decepticons is an underground revolutionary front. It's not a full-blown Civil War battle line, but they are definitely poking and prodding and trying to destabilize Cybertron. At this point, the Decepticon cause does appeal to a large part of Cybertron, at least on a base level, and this is because there is a huge disparity between your average Cybertronian and the aristocracy that continues to control the planet. But considering that there is a broad appeal, that means all kinds of characters can be brought into this cause. Good actors and bad actors. And there's a lot of people that want to fight for the sake of fighting, and Horrible is among them. And he does get Needlenose on board to start doing some gun running for the Decepticons. This actually makes Terrible and Needlenose some of the earliest agitators in the Autobot Decepticon Civil War that will eventually become a galactic Civil War. So Needlenose is kind of an interesting character in the IDW comics, because he's one of those small players, one of those dominoes, one of those cogs in a larger machine that caused massive consequences for the continuity of the Transformers. And as funny as it sounds, there are people in history like this. There are people in history that without them, no matter how small their part, the world would be a very different place. And in some respects, he is a remarkable member of the Decepticons. He does stand out. He's a double Target Master, he has a unique jet alt mode amongst a sea of Seekers, and he does fancy himself the fashionable type, meaning he will stand out amongst the drones and Viacons that populate the Decepticon forces.